The first proof of my wife's affair wasn't a kiss. It was a lipstick smudge on a lawyer's hotel receipt. It lay sweating on our kitchen counter the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Nov 24, Portland rain cutting the glass, dishwasher breathing steam. The paper smelled faintly of oysters and printer ink. The nines, it read. Suite 1706, $2,812.47. Two guests. At 11:43 p.m. Olympia oysters and a Negroni. I didn't touch it at first. The blot of lipstick was a careless signature. Wrong shade, wrong shape. Nora Sip's tote sat open on the chair, boutique receipts spilling out like confetti. She'd breezed past, kicked off her heels, and muttered, "Vendor hospitality." Vendor hospitality. That's Sep's what she called it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from. I'm Will Hale, 53, remodeler. I rebuild houses because wood tells the truth even when people don't. This house, a craftsman on SE 32nd and Hawthorne, was my pension, my anchor. My mother lost a house like this in divorce when I was 16. She told me once, holding a shoebox of bills, "Every receipt is a pension." I thought about that while the $2,812.47 stared back at me like a jury. The dishwasher clicked open. Steam rolled out. I slid the folio onto a cutting board with a spoon, dried the corner with a dish towel, then wrote in pencil. Found 11/24, 7:18 p.m. Kitchen, and I tucked it under potholders. Not rage paper, not suspicion, proof. That evening, her phone lit up on the counter. Avon courtroom baritone, smooth as lacquer. "We said'll finalize the petition Monday," he said. "Strategy session Tuesday." When she saw me listening, she smiled thinly. My lawyer. 2 days later, November 26th, a courier arrived while I was loading the truck, Mercer and Lyle LLP. Petition for dissolution, filed by attorney of record, Evan Mercer. The paper said I was controlling, that Nora wanted exclusive possession of our home, the very home I had rebuilt nail by nail. Rain softened the edges as I read. Dinner that night tasted like pennies in rain. Nora silent, eyes fixed on her plate. After she left, I opened the Schlag app. The August lock logs glowed 1:17 a.m. entries. Every other Thursday. August 15th, 29. September 12th, 26. November 14th. Always 1:17 a.m. like a clock wound to betrayal. The doorbell camera stills showed a gray Audi at 1:16 a.m., headlights glinting in puddles. I printed the logs and wrote mirror dates to Thursdays. On our family iPad, left on the kitchen desk, calendar blocks sat waiting. Consult, Thursdays. Same pattern, same rhythm as the locks. I photographed the screen, logged the time in GPS, and slid it back untouched, clean hands. The joint card showed $186 at Bloom and Vine on November 12th. I printed the emailed receipt. To E, thank you for the argument and the answer. A florist's memo dressed as poetry. 2 consult lunch payments on my Venmo, $240 each, lined up with the same weeks. I saved those too. Cefex, oven timer, ding. The sound came from the stove. Habit. I'd left the receipts warming in the oven, edges crisping like fragile evidence. The ding became my metronome. Don't scorch, don't rush. On Thanksgiving morning, I walked the perimeter of the house. The cedar siding I'd replaced board by board was slick with rain. I imagined coming back with a key that didn't fit. The house would still breathe, but not for me. I opened my notebook and listed it all. House, my pension in wood, $312,000 savings, $86,400 escrow. My name underneath, I wrote what they fear: disqualification, bar referral, fee exposure, rails to keep me from falling. December 2nd, Louis Rudd Tep's office. Carpet smelled of wet wool and toner. I spread my small deck, the nines folio with the lipstick mark, Bloom and Vine with 2E. The lock logs at 1:17 a.m., the Venmo slips. No hacks, I told him, all mine to touch. Louis leaned back. Good. If her lawyer is her lover, we don't prove it with adjectives. We prove it with custodians and clocks. I left his office lighter by $2,500 retainer, heavier with rules. No snooping, no rage texts, no shortcuts. Only subpoenas. Only truth that could stand on its own legs. That night, I opened the potholder drawer and fanned the papers like a deck of marked cards. The lipstick smear looked faint under the kitchen light, but the numbers did not. 2 guests. 1:17 a.m., $186 florist bill. The house creaked above me. I chose paper over rage, verbs over adjectives, but paper doesn't keep you warm when your marriage goes cold. Losing a marriage is one grief, losing your home is a second funeral. Thanksgiving fractured on November 28th. Nora didn't touch the turkey I had brined. She moved for exclusive possession the very next day. Paper served like a folded flag. Only it wasn't honor, it was eviction. I didn't yell, didn't beg. Instead, I slept in my truck outside the Stumptown on Division. The rain ticked the windshield like nails in a coffin. Inside the house, the furnace hummed. Outside, I clutched a thermos that steamed weak coffee. Every time I turned the key for heat, I thought, is this what my mother felt? Watching her home slide away window by window until she lived in a stranger's apartment with a shoebox of receipts. December 2nd, I sat in Louis Rudd's office. His tie was crooked, the carpet smelled of toner, but his eyes were steady. I spread the stack, the hotel folio, the florist note, the lock pings, the Venmo payments. He tapped them once with his pen. If her lawyer is her lover, will we win with rules, he said. No snooping, no rage. Our code is simple, no hacks, no guesswork, only subpoenas and custodians. Judges trust paper, not adjectives. Then he dropped the anvil. Your $86,400 renovation escrow? Frozen. Mercer filed an ex-parte order restraining use of funds. It felt like someone reached into my chest and switched off the breaker. The attic dormer, half-framed, tarped against November rain, wasn't just wood. It was the room I had promised Nora we'd make into a studio. Now it sagged, tar-dripping, because Evan Mercer knew how to freeze more than money. I went home and found the spare keys gone. The bowl by the door sat empty except for coins and a broken golf tee. My phone buzzed, temporary code 5 created. 2:03 a.m. deleted, 2:55 a.m. Someone was rehearsing how to lock me out. Cephex's oven timer ding. This time it wasn't food, just a cold skillet forgotten on the stove. I heard the ding and thought a house has its own heartbeat. When you're about to lose it, every sound feels like a countdown. That night, I remembered my mother Sip's line. Every receipt is a pension. I sat at the kitchen table, legal pad open, and listed the costs of failure. House, $312,000 in savings. $40 40 centavos escrow. My name. I underlined each one. Then I wrote what they feared: disqualification, bar referral, fee exposure. Not because I wanted to destroy them, but because I needed rails. Numbers kept me from drowning in adjectives like betrayed or worthless. On December 3rd, I started what I called clean hands, a ledger of everything: calls, spends, steps. If a judge asked, I wouldn't blink. Every entry dated, logged, calm. I wasn't here to scorch earth. I was here to balance numbers. But balance doesn't keep you warm. That week, I ate sandwiches from my truck bed. Nora Sips's car sat in the driveway like a guard dog. Lights dark, curtains closed. I thought about knocking, demanding answers. But then I heard Louis in my head. No rage texts, no snooping, subpoenas. So I sat in the cab, heater rattling, and wrote December 3rd, 11:14 p.m. Division Street, Sandwich, $7.82. Kept ledger clean. It sounds small, but when your marriage dies and your home follows it into the grave, the only thing that keeps you sane is proof that you still exist. Every receipt was proof. At work, I framed doors for a new build in Beaverton. My hands measured and cut, but my brain counted. $2,812.47 hotel. $186 florist, 1:17 a.m. locks. Numbers stacked like nails in a joist. Nora texted once on December 5th. We need to keep things civil. No heart, no fight. Just civil, like she was negotiating a vendor contract. I typed 3 replies, deleted them all, and wrote instead in the clean hands ledger. Text received 3:42 p.m. No response given. I became a bookkeeper of my own ruin. By December 7th, the rain turned to sleet. I parked across from the house and watched the porch light flicker. I pictured myself not inside sanding the rail, but standing in court, stack of papers in hand. The only warmth left was the thought that paper, if kept clean, might outlast lies. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, I'm not here to scorch earth. I'm here to balance numbers. And that's how grief settled into me. Not as fire, but as ledger lines. Marriage gone. Home slipping. But the paper? The paper was mine. If they were careful lovers, they forgot the calendar. December 4th. I sat in my truck outside a job site in Beaverton, staring at the rain on the windshield, phone in my hand. Lewis's voice from our last meeting echoed, no hacks, no guesswork, only subpoenas and custodians. But I needed eyes, clean eyes. That's when I called Maya Ortiz. She wasn't just a PI, she had clerk DNA, years spent inside court filing rooms where evidence lived or died by commas. She answered on the second ring. Maya? I am William Hale. I was referred by Lewis Rudd. You stir the remodeler? She asked, quick and steady. Lewis said you don't want rage, you want record. That seps right, I said. I need to know if my wife, that's attorney, is also her lover, but I can cross the line. Everything clean. She paused, then said, I work by 3 rules. I only touch what is public, I only photograph what I see, and I only testify to what I can swear. If you stir good with that, we start tonight. I exhaled. Start tonight. That evening, I opened the family iPad. It had lived on our kitchen desk for 5 years, synced to my thumbprint, unlocked like a front door. I'd used it for shopping lists, home bids, and Netflix. Never snooped, never prid, but on December 4th, when I clicked open the calendar, I saw the pattern laid bare. Every other Thursday, 7 p.m. to late consult E. Same Thursdays as the 1:17 a.m. pings from the Schlag app, November 14th. November 28th, December 12th, already blocked out, sitting there like a future wound. I didn't forward, didn't alter, just photographed the screen with my phone, noted the GPS and timestamp in my notebook, then slid the iPad back to sleep, clean hands. That same night, Maya texted, staked Mercer and Lyle. Gray Audi arrives 11:40 p.m., leaves 1:28 a.m. Photolog started. I stared at the message until my knuckles hurt from gripping the phone. December 6th, Mrs. Klein, the neighbor who watered our plants when we traveled, knocked on my truck window. I keep seeing that gray car outside your house after midnight, she said. Her voice was gentle, apologetic, as if she were confessing a sin. I thought you should know. I wrote it in the ledger, December 6th, 12:50 a.m. Mrs. Klein observes gray Audi. Every entry, every word dated and logged. On December 8th, I requested my own carrier logs, open to me, not her. Phone calls, billing cycles, nothing hidden. The timestamps mirrored the lock pings. 1:14 a.m., outgoing. 1:17 a.m., incoming. All to Mercer and Lyle's firm line. Clean, lawful, mine to request. By December 10th, Maya had a rhythm. She logged device IDs from public Wi-Fi pings near the 9s, photographed valet stubs time-stamped past midnight, and captured Nora and Evan walking from the parking garage, heads close, her hand brushing his coat sleeve like they were rehearsing intimacy. She emailed me 3 photos, each time-stamped, each hashed for authenticity. The printer in my garage warmed up with a low whine, spitting out each page like a verdict. The sound reminded me of hammers striking nails. Steady, irrefutable. I stacked the photos with the receipts, slipped them into a manila envelope, and wrote on the tab, calendar, locks, photos, December 10th. The trap wasn't this dramatic. It was arithmetic. On December 12th, I sat at the kitchen table, listening to the oven timer tick down on an empty tray. Safex, oven timer ding. I wasn't baking, I was waiting for the phone to buzz. waiting for Maya's text. It came at 1:36 a.m. Suite 1706. Two guests checked in. Audi in valet. Mercer photographed leaving. I stared at the glow of the phone screen. My reflection caught in the glass. 53 years old. A remodeler who knew wood and walls better than people. My marriage was gone, but the paper in my drawer was alive, breathing, multiplying. Maya called the next morning. You don't need me to tell you they separate together. You need me to make it stand in court. That means getting Evan Sepper's denial on the record first. Then we let the custodians, hotel, florist, boutique, do the talking. Why not just show the photos? I asked. Because photos are adjectives, she said. Business records are verbs, and judges don't twist it like adjectives. That line sank into me like a nail through oak. Photos are adjectives, records are verbs. On December 12th, Lewis filed targeted discovery and drafted subpoenas. Hotel records, boutique ledgers, firm reimbursements. Each one a brick in the wall. Each one timed to line up with the calendar blocks and the 1:17 a.m. lock logs. That night I wrote in my ledger, December 12th, 10:43 p.m. discovery served, fuse lit. And then I closed the book. Because I knew when the calendar and the heartbeat line up, when the pings and the receipts march in rhythm, lies don't breathe long. Paper doesn't panic when you stare at it, people do. December 9th, Portland wore a wet wool coat. I finished a cabinet install in Laurelhurst and sat in my truck, heater ticking, watching rain crawl down the windshield like slow handwriting. Maya texted first, Irving Street kitchen, 11:08 p.m. Nora and Evan exit, hands brush. Bill split boutique card. A minute later, the photos arrived, 3 frames, each numbered and hash stamped. Streetlight glare pooled in wet brick. Nora's scarf was the same cranberry one she wore the night we picked out tile samples, before attorneys and hotel folios. I printed the photos in the garage. The old brother laser woke with its low whine, then the steady clack-clack as pages slid to the tray. I wrote in pencil at the bottom of each sheet, printed December 9th, 11:52 p.m. from Maya's secure link. No edits. I didn't staple. I used binder clips. Easy to remove for scanning later, impossible to tear lines of text. Chain of custody isn't theater. It's craft. December 10th brought the symmetry I both dreaded and needed. The 9s again. Maya's message landed at 1:41 a.m. Valet notes, gray Audi picked up 1:35 a.m. Witness, doorman. Sweet reference repeated by desk to guest overheard. In her call the next morning she sounded like a clerk taking an oath. We have 2 nights that look the same, Will. Restaurant, walk, hotel, after hours exit. Same car, same hour. I set the printouts on the workbench beside the lock logs from 1:17 a.m. The florist receipt to E, thank you for the argument and the answer. And the $2,812.47 folio with the lipstick smudge. Then I did what I do best, squared the edges with my palm until the stack sat true. Woodworkers trust the square, lawyers trust the stamp. By noon, I was in Lewis's office, the smell of toner and rain-soaked coats greeting me like a courthouse foyer. He took the pile, flipped each page, and didn't compliment a single photograph. That's why I'd hired him. Okay, he said. We moved to protect that escrow before the dormer rots. Temporary restraining order to prohibit dissipation and preserve status quo. We propose essential repairs only under court supervision. I pictured the tarp dormer and felt the familiar clench in my chest. Do it, I said. We got to work like we were framing a wall. He drafted, I notarized. The paralegal slid a jurat across the desk. I signed, the ballpoint dragging slightly over my last name, Hale, like it wanted to hold on. The copier answered with a rhythm that sounded almost like a verdict. Clack, clack, clack. A red filed stamp landed on the motion with the thud of a mallet. Through the window, rain stitched the street into one gray seam. Next, Lewis said, we formalize the keypad change. You stir not locking anyone out. You stir keeping a record. We serve the new code through counsel. No surprises. We drove to my house. The porch, slick with rain, smelled like cedar in November. I opened the keypad housing, read off the model and serial, then changed the master and user codes while Lewis photographed each screen. Schlage B 365, Shishnen, he dictated, and I repeated. We signed a short affidavit in the kitchen, right on the butcher block. I'd oiled in September, stating the new code and the date, and that a copy would be served on Nora's attorney the same day. No theater, just process. The oven stayed silent. No timer tonight. I wasn't drying evidence. I was preserving access. He filed the Tureau that afternoon with a declaration detailing the escrow's purpose, the stage of construction, the weather risk. We aren't asking to spend, he said. We're asking to protect. Judges hear that difference. Then we turned the screws, not with accusation, but with paper. Lewis outlined the proof path in a single breath, like a carpenter calling cuts. Hotel folios and occupancy via custodian. Boutique ledger entries for vendor hospitality suite via subpoena. Firm reimbursements initialed by NH via custodian. Each record authenticated. Each one cross-ref to date and time. No adjectives. I nodded. My mother's phrase, every receipt is a pension, clicked into the dovetail of Lewis's, no adjectives. That evening I walked the block to clear my head. Mrs. Klein waved from across the street, her umbrella a faded sunflower. You doing okay, Will? Demure whined. I wanted to tell her that okay was a moving target. Instead, I said, we start working it out. She lowered her voice. I saw that gray car again the other night. If you need me to write something down, I will. Noted, I said, and meant it in the legal sense. Lewis will get in touch. Paper doesn't panic. People do unless you give them a script with lines they can swear to. December 11th, the hotel's counsel returned a bland email acknowledging service. Our custodian will appear if necessary. That sentence felt like a stud going plumb. Bloom and Vine responded too, confirming they'd produce records upon subpoena, order details, payment method, memo lines, and the card tail number. My stomach clenched at the thought of seeing those digits align with Evan's visa. 0197, but clenches don't win hearings, records do. By late afternoon, Evan moved to attack. A PDF hit Lewis's inbox at 4:12 p.m. Motion for sanctions. The tone was what I'd expected, paranoid narrative. Baseless harassment, invasion of privacy. He wanted the court to punish me for daring to connect dots that, in his telling, weren't even on the same page. Lewis read in silence, then scratched a note on a yellow pad. Judges dislike adjectives. He looked up. This is good for us. Good? I asked. He's over-argued, Lewis said. Adjectives instead of exhibits. We'll answer with 3 things. Your clean hands ledger, the service receipts for our subpoenas, and declarations certifying chain of custody on what you lawfully possess. Then we sit quietly and let the court notice who brought verbs. We drafted that night. He quoted our code in the first paragraph. No hacks, no guesswork, only subpoenas and custodians. He attached my ledger excerpts, entries like December 3rd, 11:14 p.m. Division Street sandwich, $7.82. Kept ledger clean to show the court I had lived boring on purpose. He included the notarized keypad affidavit to prove we weren't playing lockout games. He stapled the hotel's bland acknowledgement behind a short, calm declaration. We have sought only business records. We have not accessed opposing parties' accounts or devices. As I initialed each page, rain began to tick-tick against the window, a soft metronome for patience. We filed the opposition the next morning, December 12th. At 8:09 a.m. the clerk's red stamp hit the top page with that same mallet thunk. In my chest something eased. Paper on paper. Force meeting counterforce. In the lull between filings, I drove to the job site in Beaverton and hung a door. The mortise chisel made its tidy bites. The hinge knuckles lined up and the leaf sat flush. A door that fits doesn't slam, it whispers closed. I thought about courtrooms and doors and how both work best when they're square. By evening, the court set a quick status conference for December 19th. Not the big day yet, that would be January 23rd. The evidentiary hearing twinned with the final, but enough for a judge to see who was shouting and who was showing. Lewis called it the preview that matters. We used the week to stack quiet. He sent subpoenas to the boutique and the firm narrow and polite. He prepped a short witness list for later: hotel custodian, florist manager, Mrs. Klein, and Maya, names that would eventually stand in the space where adjectives once strutted. I packed the banker's box we labeled pension, receipts. The nines folio sat on top, lipstick smudge turned ugly under fluorescent light. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the weight of wood. On December 13th, the escrow agent emailed, "Funds currently restrained per ex parte. Will hold pending court direction." I replied with a single line, copied to all counsel. "Understood. Repairs limited to weatherproofing per TRO once entered." It read like a blueprint. That's what I wanted. The last move of the week belonged to Lewis. He slid a 3-page brief across the table, his handwriting in the margins spare as a framing plan. "If they call you paranoid," he said, "we give the court a ledger. If they call you invasive, we give the court a custodian. If they call you angry, we give the court silence." He smiled, tired and small. Judges dislike adjectives. I went home and stood in the kitchen, hand on the drawer with the potholders and the papers. I thought about the first day, the lipstick smear, the way the receipt had sweated on the counter like a living thing. It was just paper, but it stared back without fear. When people panic, their mouths reach for color. When paper speaks, it uses numbers and dates, and numbers don't blink. Handoff Evans' sanctions motion had color. We answered with exhibits. Next was the room where stories swear. Room 4B was already on the calendar. They thought the word privileged was a tarp big enough to hide a hotel bed. December 15th, rain pushed sideways across Portland, the kind that stings if you stand in it too long. I sat in Lewis's office while he sorted discovery responses like a carpenter sorting warped boards. One by one, the nails started showing. First, firm reimbursements. A $420 charge at the Nines Bar December 10th. Memo line, client continuity meeting. Initials NH. I didn't need a dictionary to know that stood for Nora Hale. Second, boutique ledger. Nora's store had recorded a suite rental under vendor hospitality. Same date, same hotel. The handwriting was hers. I'd seen it on invoices for years, the tight, rounded loops. Then came Bloom and Vine Seps production. A florist manager Sepsidavit stapled to receipts. Evan Mercer Seps's name printed bold. Visa ending 0197. Memo to E. Thank you for the argument and the answer. I stared at the paper until the lines blurred. The words were supposed to be sweet, but in the courtroom they'd sour. Business records are verbs, Maya had said, and these verbs cut. On December 16th, Mrs. Klein signed her affidavit at a notary down the street. She wore her sunflower umbrella folded under one arm and told the notary, "Yes, I saw them. After midnight, more than once. Him in the gray car. Him walking with her toward the porch." She wrote it down, signed her name, and slid the paper across. No adjectives, just testimony. Lewis collected it all into a neat folder. "We file a motion to disqualify for conflict," he said. His tone was quiet, surgical. Attorney-client privilege isn't set, a blanket. It doesn't set cover misconduct. If they were lovers, he can set also be her lawyer. The rules are clear. That night, I opened the potholder drawer and laid the stack out like cards on a table. The Nines folio with the lipstick smudge. The florist memo, Visa 0197. The boutique ledger calling adultery hospitality. And Mrs. Klein's affidavit, sunflower umbrella folded in the corner of the notary's office. 4 pieces, 4 corners of the box. SFX oven timer ding. The sound startled me. Empty oven, no food, just the timer I'd set to remind myself not to drown in the papers. I lifted the folio and ran my thumb over the embossed hotel logo. Paper doesn't panic. People do. On December 17th, Evan filed his reply to Arturo. He used words like overreach and conspiracy. He claimed every late-night hotel bill was client strategy, every florist note decor for events. He invoked privilege like it was armor, his signature curling at the bottom of 20 pages of adjectives. Lewis didn't even sigh. He just circled a phrase in the reply and wrote, in block letters, "Adjectives don't hold weight." Then he drafted a 2-page motion in response. Clean, measured. "The appearance of conflict erodes confidence in the process," he wrote. "Attorney-client privilege is a shield, not a sword." On December 18th, the court clerk stamped the hearing date, January 23rd, the same morning as the final dissolution. To streamline proceedings, the order read. It meant our showdown would be doubled. Conflict first, then merits. One morning, 2 funerals. That evening, Maya called from her car. "They'll try to hide behind privilege," she said, windshield wipers swiping in the background. "But privilege doesn't cover fraud. It doesn't cover perjury. And it doesn't cover a lawyer billing the firm for oysters at 11:43 p.m. with his client in suite 1706. I sat at my kitchen table, listening to the timer tick toward another ding. I thought about Nora's voice, casual that Sunday. Vendor hospitality. I thought about Evan's baritone, on speakerphone, strategy session Tuesday. And I thought about the judge's bench in room 4B, the way wood there would echo when a gavel fell. That night I rehearsed in the mirror, 1 breath answers. 2 breath exhibits. "Mr. Hale, did you access your wife's SEPS accounts?" "No." "Did you alter any records?" "No." "Whose receipts are these?" "Mine, joint account, joint card, family iPad." I didn't practice adjectives, just nouns and verbs, because in January only verbs would survive. Before I closed the ledger, I wrote in neat block letters, January 23rd, evidentiary hearing, witnesses, hotel custodian, florist manager, Mrs. Klein, Maya, me. Then I underlined the date, twice. The closer we got to court, the more their story needed miracles. December 19th, Multnomah County Courthouse. 8:27 a.m. The marble foyer carried whispers like rainwater down a gutter. Our matter was on for a short status. Escrow, conduct, discovery, not the main event, just the kind of hearing where a judge takes the temperature and, if you're lucky, notices who's sweating. Evans spoke first. Smooth as lacquer. "Your Honor, these late-night meetings were strategy, time-sensitive. We were preparing pleadings." He did not blink when he said preparing, like it could happen at 1:35 a.m. in a hotel bar with oysters and a Negroni. Judge Whitcomb looked over her glasses. "Strategy at the 9s past 1 a.m.? A single eyebrow climbed like a scaffold. "Counsel, we sipped are discussing escrow and conduct. Keep your timeline handy." She turned to Lewis. "Mr. Rudd?" Lewis stood, hands folded. "We seek 2 things. First, narrowly tailored protection of the $86,400 escrow, so the half-built dormer doesn't sit rot in December rain. Second, orderly discovery, third-party business records, authenticated by custodians. No accounts accessed, no devices touched." The judge paged through the Truro motion, the photos, the lock logs, the boutique ledger excerpt with vendor hospitality. She tapped the page where the lock showed 1:17 a.m. "This will be explored at the evidentiary hearing," she said. "For today, escrow is partially unfrozen for weatherproofing only. Mr. Hale, coordinate through counsel. Receipts retained." She turned back to Evan. "And counsel, if there are after-hours strategy sessions, I recommend they be conducted in your office during office hours." It was a small sentence, but it felt like a stud going plumb. We filed out with a signed order in hand, tarp replacement authorized, flashing repair permitted, no drawdown beyond necessity. Justice doesn't sing, it itemizes. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. I texted my roofer, court-approved weatherproofing. Hold all invoices, photo log every step. He replied with a thumbs up and a shot of the dormer, tar blistered but still holding. January 5th felt like a trapdoor. My phone blinked with a voicemail from Nora, voice thin and breathy. "Will, we can still end this quietly," she said. "We don't need all of this. All of this." The phrase hovered like steam. She wasn't asking to talk about us. She was asking me to stop the paper from walking into room 4B under oath. I sat at the kitchen table and replayed the message until the silence after her words became the loudest sound in the room. Then I opened the ledger and wrote, January 5th, 10:14 a.m. Voicemail from Nora, We can still end this quietly. No response given. Preserved recording. Audio file hash generated. I exported the file, generated an SHA-256 hash on my laptop, printed the hash string and paper-clipped it to a CDR and label for Lewis. Chain of custody isn't about drama. It's about being able to say, this is the same thing I received without flinching. 2 days later, January 7th, the escrow agent emailed to confirm receipt protocols under the order. I sent back a single line, all weatherproofing receipts to be scanned same day. Originals stored in banker's box, pension receipts. The box sat on my dining chair like a quiet witness, lid bowed by tidy stacks. On January 9th, an envelope appeared in our mailbox addressed in Nora's handwriting. Evan, no return, no stamp. Just slid in by hand. I picked it up with 2 fingers, photographed both sides on the porch with the day's paper for scale, then put it back where I found it. I texted Lewis a single sentence, envelope addressed to opposing counsel found in our mailbox, photographed in situ. Returned unopened. He responded with a dot, then good, clean hands. That night, Portland wore its winter hush, the kind of cold that files the edges off every sound. Maya texted me a pin drop at Council Crest. They like the overlook, she wrote. City lights make people think they're invisible. 15 minutes later, she sent 2 photos. Nora and Evan at the railing, the city hissing below like a giant sleepy radiator. His hand settled on the small of her back, the way only familiarity allows. The timestamps were precise, the EXIF embedded. The file hashes printed in a narrow gray band at the bottom like a heartbeat on paper. I didn't forward the photos to anyone except Lewis. I didn't show a friend. I didn't post or rage. I slid the prints into a clear sleeve, labeled the sleeve Council Crest. January 9th, 9:22, 9:24 p.m. Device ID MO04, and logged it in the ledger with a line that felt like a prayer. No adjectives. Cefx, oven timer, ding. The empty oven ticked its ritual. I had set the timer to pull the roofer's printed photos, flashing replaced, tarp secured, so I wouldn't warp them with heat. I lifted the sheets, date stamp in the corner, a Sharpie arrow showing the repaired seam. Receipts were stapled behind the images with neat, flat crowns. I breathed, rain I could handle. Lies I would table and measure. January 12th, we met with Maya and Lewis to lock the witness plan. Lewis wrote the order of operations in block letters on a yellow legal pad, like a carpenter calling cuts. Conflict first. Mr. Mercer, do you have any personal relationship with Mrs. Hale? Yes, no. Custodians. Hotel records, occupancy for Suite 1706 on December 10th. Boutique ledger, vendor hospitality entry. Florist order by Evan M. Visa 0197. Eyewitness. Mrs. Klein, gray Audi. Midnight entries, porch proximity. Investigator. Maya, photos, timestamps. Device IDs, hash logs. August lock logs at 1:17 a.m. My Venmo consult lunch pattern. Clean hands ledger, key code affidavit. Answer in nouns and verbs, Lewis said. Let their adjectives hang in the air like fog. Maya added the chain of custody script, soft as a clerk's oath. I shot on MO04, stored original raw files to encrypted drive, generated hashes on capture, stored duplicate JPEGs for exhibits. I never altered exposure or crop. I can testify to that, she smiled, small and kind. Paper lives or dies by its path. January 14th, Judge Whitcomb issued a minute order on the docket. Evidentiary hearing January 23rd to address conflict. Court to revisit temporary orders sua sponte. If conflict found, in plain language. If Evan was out, the court would reconsider the landscape with clean eyes. The sentence sat in my chest like warmth. I pressed my navy suit 2 days early. Shoes burnished, tie practiced, half Windsor, not too proud. In the mirror I still looked like a man who knew wood better than people, but my posture had changed. I wasn't walking in to fight. I was walking in to let paper talk. On January 18th, Evan filed a supplemental clarification, newly careful with tone. Strategy had shifted from swagger to hedging. Any after-hours meetings were purely professional, he wrote. Any perceived familiarity is taken out of context. He did not explain the florist memo, the bar tab at 11:43 p.m., or the doorman's note about the gray Audi at 1:35 a.m. He did not mention council crest. Silence is a kind of adjective, too. January 20th. I drove to the house on SE 32nd and stood beneath the porch light I'd chosen for its warm bell of glass. The dormer held under the new tarp. The flashing flash dull and right. I could feel the house exhale. Almost there, I said out loud. To cedar and paint and memories that no longer argued back. The night before court, I packed the banker's SIPS box. Tab A. The Nines Folio $2,812.47. Suite 17,062 guests. 11:43 p.m. Oysters plus Negroni. Tab B. Bloom and Vine $186. Memo to E. Thank you for the argument and the answer. Visa 0197. Tab C. Boutique Ledger. Vendor Hospitality Suite. Tab D. Lock Logs 1:17 a.m. entries alternating Thursdays. Tab E. Venmo Consult Lunch $240 entries. Dates rhyming with pings. Tab F. Council Crest Photos XF hashes. Device ID. Tab G. Keypad Affidavit Schlag Model Serial Service of Code through Council. Tab H. Roofer Receipts plus Photo Log under TRO. Tab I. Clean Hands Ledger Excerpts. I placed a single blue post-it on the inside lid. No adjectives. Under it, in pencil, every receipt is a pension. Morning came. January 23rd circled on my calendar, like a door I had measured 3 times, and was ready to hang. I slipped on the navy suit, slid the ledger into the briefcase, lifted the banker's box, and touched the new deadbolt once, a habit I had learned from months of checking. Room 4B was where stories swear. I didn't need a miracle. I needed the clerk to say, "Raise your right hand," and the records to breathe. Perjury is romance with paperwork until the clerk swears you in. January 23rd, Multnomah County Courthouse. Room 4B smelled like varnished benches and old radiators. Fluorescents hummed overhead, steady and cold. The clock on the back wall ticked toward 9 a.m. I carried in my banker's box. The one labeled pension, receipts. The edges of the files pressed against my palm like a heartbeat. Evan Mercer was already at counsel's table, suit sharp, tie a little too bright. Nora sat beside him, hair pinned perfectly, eyes fixed on her hands. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. The petition she'd signed 3 months earlier had already taken the place of eye contact. The clerk called the matter. Hale versus Hale, dissolution and related motions. Appearances for the record? Lewis rose. Lewis Rudd for petitioner William Hale. His voice carried like cedar splitting under an axe. Solid, no adornment. Evan stood. Evan Mercer for respondent Nora Hale. His tone had the smooth edge of lacquer, but his eyes flicked once toward the banker's box on my table. He knew what was inside. Paper doesn't sweat. People do. Judge Whitcomb adjusted her glasses. We shall begin with the motion to disqualify for conflict. Counsel, any preliminary remarks? Evan was first. Your Honor, the allegations before you are a paranoid narrative. My client's husband is attempting to sabotage her right to representation. Any late-night meetings were purely strategic, dictated by the needs of litigation. Attorney-client privilege protects those communications. In the Satamang Sauv, and with the Satamang. His words moved fast, like someone sprinting across ice, hoping speed would keep him from falling. Lewis didn't rise immediately. He let the silence hum, then stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, attorney-client privilege is a shield, not a sword. What we present today are business records authenticated by custodians, eyewitness testimony, and chain of custody exhibits. They speak without adjectives. Suffix oven timer ding. The sound came from my head, not the courtroom. A reflex now. Each time paper surfaced, the timer went off in my mind. The clerk swore Evan in, right hand raised, voice steady. Do you have any personal relationship with Mrs. Hale outside of representation? He didn't hesitate. No. Lewis stepped closer. Mr. Mercer, were you present in Suite 1706 at the Nines Hotel on December 10th? Evans smirked faintly. No. Lewis nodded. Hotel custodian, please. A woman in a gray blazer walked to the stand. She carried a binder with colored tabs, set it down, and swore in. Her voice was brisk. Business records of the Nines produced under subpoena, occupancy for Suite 1706 on December 10th, 2 guests. Check-in 10:56 p.m. Check-out 9:08 a.m. Invoice total $2,812.47. Folio initialed by NH, charge coded to Visa ending 0197. Lewis asked, Are these records kept in the ordinary course of business? Yes. Were they altered? No. He marked them as Exhibit 4. The room was quiet except for the scribble of the judge's pen. Evan shifted in his chair. Next came the florist manager, apron folded neatly, affidavit already stapled to receipts. She adjusted her glasses and said, Order placed November 12th, Visa ending 0197. Memo lined CA 2E. Thank you for the argument and the answer. 2 ordered by Evan M. Pickup confirmed. Lewis kept it to 3 questions. Are these records kept in the ordinary course of business? Yes. Were they altered? No. Who placed the order? Even Miss. Exhibit 7. Then Mrs. Klein, sunflower umbrella in hand, voice soft but steady. Yes, I saw him more than once. Around 1 a.m. gray Audi parked. I saw him walk with Nora to the porch. They went inside. Lewis asked, Can you identify the man? She turned, pointed. Him. Mr. Mercer. The courtroom air tightened. Evan cleared his throat, but said nothing. Finally, Maya, calm, precise chain of custody in her veins. She listed dates, times, device IDs. She explained how she photographed the gray Audi at the Nines valet, how she captured Nora and Evan at Council Crest with timestamps embedded, how she generated hashes on capture and stored originals on an encrypted drive. She used words like unaltered, duplicate, verified, custodian testimony. Lewis asked, Did you ever alter exposure, crop, or metadata? No. Originals sealed. Duplicates hash matched. Chain intact. Exhibit 12? Exhibit 13? Exhibit 14? Then it was my turn. I carried the ledger to the stand, opened to the page dated November 14th. These are the August lock logs, I said. 1:17 a.m. every other Thursday. November 14th, November 28th. I wasn't home. I was bidding jobs in Beaverton. Each entry mirrored the calendar blocks marked consult. Lewis asked, Did you access your wife Sep's private accounts? No. Did you alter any records? No. Whose receipts are these? Mine. Joint account. Joint card. Family iPad, always unlocked, always in our kitchen. I answered in nouns and verbs. No adjectives. The judge's pen kept moving. Lewis closed with one final piece. He entered my Venmo statements. 2 $240 payments labeled consult lunch tape measure emoji. Dates rhymed with the lock pings. The judge read silently, lips pressing thin. The courtroom's HVAC hummed. My pulse beat against my collar. Then came the moment that still echoes. The judge looked up from the stack of exhibits. The wall clock behind her ticked steady. The second hand landed on 1:17 p.m. She tapped the folio from the Nines. Counsel, you denied being present. The records say otherwise. The florist records say otherwise. The neighbor says otherwise. The investigator confirms otherwise. This court finds an impermissible conflict. Mr. Mercer, you are disqualified. The transcript is referred to the state bar. Evan's face lost its polish. Swagger drained out like air from a punctured tire. He gathered his papers slowly. Chair scraping. Nora kept her eyes down, hands gripping the table until her knuckles whitened. Judge Whitcomb continued, voice firm. Temporary orders are revisited such as sponte. Litigation integrity requires it. Counsel, please step aside. Respondent is directed to secure new representation before we proceed further. The gavel struck. Not loud, just final. The silence in room 4B swallowed even the HVAC hum. Paper had spoken. Adjectives had withered. Lewis leaned toward me and whispered, "We settle on clean ground now." I looked at the banker's box at my feet, the blue post-it inside that read no adjectives, and for the first time in months my chest loosened. Because in room 4B, where stories swear, lies suffocated under oath. When the mask falls, even the lies look tired. Within a week of the disqualification, the tone of every filing shifted. Evan Mercer's name disappeared from the docket, replaced by letters requesting withdrawal. The swagger that had filled every pleading shrank to silence. A chair once full of certainty now sat empty. On January 30th, a letter arrived by courier Mercer and Lyle, letterhead embossed, but the sentences stripped of pride. The proposal was careful, deliberate. Nora would agree to cover my conflict litigation fees, $18,900. She would accept either an equalization payment or a neutral sale of the craftsman. The ink on the page trembled in its own way, not because the words shook, but because they no longer carried Evan's voice. I read the letter twice, then folded it into my ledger. The mask had slipped. What had been painted as strategy was now reduced to math. That afternoon, Nora appeared in court with new counsel, not the bright litigator shine, not the confident baritone, a quiet attorney with glasses that slid down his nose. He introduced himself without adjectives. She signed papers, hands trembling just enough that I noticed. I looked away. I wasn't there to drink in her ruin. I was there to protect what was mine. Lewis filed Maya's full report under seal. Third-party privacy, he explained. We protect witnesses, preserve the record for appeal. No leaks, no spectacle. It was surgical, the way a careful craftsman lays tar paper before shingles, layers you never see, but without them the house leaks. Cephx, oven timer ding. This time there was food. A roast chicken in the oven, skin blistering golden, thyme perfuming the kitchen. For months the ding had meant evidence, panic, empty trays. Tonight it meant dinner. I carved it slow, the knife gliding through white meat, the sound of home returning in slices. That night I slept in the house again, not as an intruder, not as a guest, but on schedule. Lewis had arranged a written occupancy rotation until final judgment. Tuesdays and Thursdays I was home. Weekends split. My key slid into the lock and turned smooth. No resistance. The Schlage clicked. No mystery codes flashing on the app. For the first time in months, the house exhaled under me. February 2nd, I found myself in the garage, sanding the edge of a cabinet door, cedar dust settling in soft spirals. It felt almost holy, the sound of sandpaper against wood after weeks of photocopiers and stamps, work that smelled like wood, not toner. By February 5th, mediation loomed. February 7th circled on the calendar, thick red ink. I packed the banker's box again, though I suspected we wouldn't need every tab. The weight of it comforted me. Inside, the blue post-it still read, "No adjectives." Beneath it, my mother's line, "Every receipt is a pension." On the morning of February 7th, I loaded the box into my truck, a banker's box waiting by the door, labeled with neat black marker. It looked almost ordinary, but inside was the difference between ruin and balance. At mediation, Nora sat across from me, her careful lawyer flipping pages. She didn't look like the woman from Council Crest, backlit by city lights and secrecy. She looked tired. Masks, when heavy, sink the shoulders. Her attorney cleared his throat. Our position is straightforward. Mrs. Hale accepts liability for conflict litigation fees. She is willing to proceed with either an equalization payment or neutral sale. She requests confidentiality of exhibits. Lewis leaned toward me, voice low. They set her waving a white flag. I nodded. The mask was off. Behind it was exhaustion, not malice. When I signed the mediation schedule, my hand didn't shake. Paper doesn't panic. People do, and finally the panic wasn't mine. Justice isn't loud. It's a line item that balances. February 7th, Mediation Day. The conference room smelled like dry coffee and legal pads. A whiteboard stood ready like a blank ledger. The mediator, a former judge with a voice like soft gravel, asked for opening positions. No speeches, just numbers. Nora Sip's attorney went first. Mrs. Hale agrees to pay Mr. Hale Sips's conflict litigation fees, $18,900. She will accept either an equalization payment for Mr. Hale to keep the residence or a neutral sale with proceeds split. She requests confidentiality of exhibits and non-disparagement. Lewis slid our sheet across the table. Mr. Hale accepts fees paid. He proposes a buyout based on current appraisal less mortgage, adjusted for dissipation and litigation costs caused by the conflict. Alternatively, neutral sale. Either way, key surrender affidavits and no duplicate keys retained. USEO and sums for the rederis. The mediator drew boxes on the whiteboard. 1. Appraisal, $742,000. 2. Mortgage balance, $384,000. 3. Net equity, $742,000, $38,000, $58,000. He capped his marker and looked at both of us. Baseline is $358,000 in equity. Now the adjustments. Lewis tapped his notepad. Litigation misconduct and conflict created unnecessary cost and delay. We seek a dissipation credit and fee allocation reflected in the split. Proposed 60/40ths equity split in Mr. Hale Sip's favor, rooted in those findings, plus $18,900 fees to Mr. Hale. Nora Sip's attorney adjusted his glasses. Define dissipation. Hotel spend, boutique ledger mischaracterized as the vendor hospitality, 7 firm reimbursements coded as that is client continuity 7 at 11:43 p.m., and the court 7's disqualification order. Lewis said, "We are not punishing morality, we 7 allocating cost created by conflict." The mediator nodded slowly. "Then we talk in credits." He wrote dissipation credit $28,000 on the board, a round number capturing the spend, the custody of records and the delay short of a sanction but real. He drew a line beneath it. Now let Seps see where the math lands. He rewrote the core. Net equity, $358,000. Adjusted split, 60% to Will, 40% to Nora due to conflict-created costs. Will Seps share 60%, $214,800. Nora Sips share 40%, su cento $40 20 centesimi. He added the dissipation credit, plus dissipation credit to Will, $28,000. Adjusted target for Will, $214,800 plus $28,000 equals sign $242,800. Adjusted target for Nora, $143,200, $28,000 equals sign $115,200. Then the buyout math if I kept the house. Buyout amount owed to Nora equity cash out, $115,200. Plus fees owed to me, $18,900 paid separately by Nora. Title to Will. Keys surrendered under affidavit. No copies retained. Nora's attorney conferred with her in whispers. She nodded once, shoulders tight, jaw set. We counter with a single adjustment, raise Nora's equity to $151,000, and preserve the $18,900 fee payment to Mr. Hale. The $151,000 reflects a middle ground on credits yet recognizes the disqualification. With Ketsheshigade to set. With Edwolfagade Bewol floors and try to pay. Lewis looked at me. The number wasn't arbitrary. It was the same figure from our earlier outline. I ran the measure in my head like a tape across a stud, straight, no bow. We could argue, cut a few thousand here, add a few there. But wood is happiest when you let it lie where it sits, true. Done, I said. The mediator wrote it calmly. Final framework buyout. Appraised value, $742,000. Mortgage, $384,000. Net equity, $358,000. Settlement equity to Nora cash, $151,000. Fees to Will separate $18,900. Non-disparagement, mutual confidentiality exhibits under seal. Key surrender affidavits, executed at judgment. No duplicates retained. Schedule 45 days for equity buyout, refinance, or payoff to remove Nora from mortgage. There was no applause, just pens on paper, signatures arriving like slow rain. When it was my turn, my hand didn't shake. I signed the consent terms, and the mediator slid copies into neat, labeled folders. Paper doesn't panic. People do. Today, paper held steady and people followed. 2 days later, February 9th, we walked the terms into the courthouse. The consent judgment looked unremarkable, lines and blanks, the same black serif font that had announced my undoing months ago. The judge reviewed the settlement, eyes moving evenly. This reflects allocation due to litigation conduct, she said. It is not a moral sanction. She initialed the pages and signed. Judgment entered February 10th. I exhaled and felt the house. Our house, my house, exhale with me. The Craftsman on SE 32nd wasn't a trophy. It was a promise kept to the younger version of me who watched his mother lose her home and survive from a shoebox of receipts. I thought of her saying every receipt is a pension. She was right. The receipts had bought back a future. Outside the courthouse, Nora stood with her careful attorney. Her eyes were rimmed red. We didn't speak. I didn't gloat. I nodded a small human nod to a person I once loved, and now simply couldn't live with. Justice by line item had done its quiet work. Back home, I unlocked the door with my key. The schlag clicked, the house breathed out cedar and dust, and something like relief. I set the banker's box on the dining table and pulled out tab A, tab B, tab C, then stopped. They could rest now, sealed and labeled for the file. I didn't need to rehearse the pain anymore. That evening, I walked the perimeter, palm on siding, boots, careful on the porch. I had sanded with Nora once on a Sunday. Before lawyers and folios, streetlights made the wet boards glow. I took out my phone and snapped a single photo of the porch light at dusk. Steady and warm, the way my mother liked it, and saved it to a folder named Kept. In the kitchen, I wrote one last line in the clean hands ledger. February 10th. Consent judgment entered. Buyout $151,000 to Nora within 45 days. $18,900 fees to Will. Keys surrendered by affidavit. House retained. I underlined retained. Not because I won a prize, but because I refused to be ruined. For days afterward, I'd catch myself listening for the oven timer. Safek's oven timer ding. It still chimed in my head, but now it sounded like something else, like a reminder to turn off the heat, because dinner's ready, not because evidence is drying in an empty pan. 2 guests, 1:17 a.m. vendor hospitality. Those phrases had once bruised me. Today they balanced a ledger. Justice didn't roar, it reconciled. Revenge is a locked door unless you learn why you're guarding it. February 11th. The day after judgment, I walked through the house like a surveyor. Each room felt both familiar and foreign, like a memory I could touch. The Craftsman on SE 32nd wasn't just a structure. It was my pension in cedar and paint, my proof against the shoebox my mother once held after losing her house in divorce. I stopped at the porch rail. I ran my fingers over the grain, the same rail Nora and I had sanded together years ago on a bright Sunday morning. She'd laughed when cedar dust stuck to my beard. Back then the house was a canvas. Now it was an affidavit. I opened the banker's box one more time. Tab A, tab B, tab C. All lined, all square. They had done their work. They had given the house back to me. Ledger balanced, judgment signed. But justice wasn't the same thing as healing. Paper can win cases, it cannot warm a bed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the clean hands ledger. I flipped back to the first entry, November 24th, 7:18 p.m. The nines folio, lipstick smudge. I read forward, line after line of rain-soaked sandwiches, doorbell logs, receipts underlined, affidavits filed. My life captured in nouns and verbs, no adjectives. The ledger had kept me steady, rails against rage. But now, I didn't need rails as much as I needed boundaries. Boundaries weren't set for Nora. They were for me. I wrote a new entry February 11th, 9:02 p.m. Boundary set, house mine. Ledger closed, life forward. The oven timer dinged, Cefx oven timer ding. For months it had marked evidence drying or documents needing ink. Tonight it marked nothing. The pan inside was empty. I smiled and let it be. February 12th. I changed the locks one final time. The new Schlag deadbolts clicked sharp and clean. Lewis stood beside me with a clipboard as we logged each key, one for me, one sealed in his file. We notarized the key surrender affidavit, my signature steady, his witness line crisp. I slipped the affidavit into a plastic sleeve labeled Final Keys. When the bolt turned, the house sighed. I did too. I realized something then. Revenge isn't cruelty. It isn't blood. It's drawing a boundary where someone else once trespassed. I didn't ruin them. I refused to be ruined. That evening, I walked through the house with a tape measure. Not for court, not for evidence. Just for me. Porch 18 feet wide. Living room beam, 11 feet. Cedar solid. Bedroom window, 46 inches across. Glass steady. Numbers that weren't proof, but home. I thought of Nora not as a villain, but as a person whose choices cracked us. Her boutique was drowning. Her fear had been real. Evan's ambition had been real too. Their affair wasn't a novel. It was math that didn't balance. I couldn't carry it anymore, and I didn't need to. In the quiet, I whispered a line, not to her, not to Evan, but to myself. You didn't lose me, you gave me away. The Craftsman wasn't a trophy. It was a promise kept to my mother. To the man I'd been at 16, standing in a rented kitchen with nothing but a shoebox of bills. To the version of me who this past winter chose paper over rage. I closed the ledger, slid it into the banker's box, sealed the lid with one strip of blue painter's tape. On the top, I wrote in black marker, "Boundaries, not blood." Then I set it on the shelf in the garage, between a box of cedar shims and a toolbox scarred from years of work. Not a shrine, just a record. The house was mine. The boundaries were mine. And for the first time in months, my revenge wasn't fire. It was a door locked and square with keys logged and affidavits signed. The quiet after a storm is when you hear the windows settle. March crept in with a clean chill. The porch boards, which had carried winter like a weight, felt lighter under my boots. I made coffee and stood in the doorway listening to the house breathe, radiators ticking, the fridge's soft hum, cedar faint in the warmed air. A home makes small, honest noises after you stop asking it to defend you. I kept my mornings simple, auto-pay set, mortgage, taxes, insurance, each one a new line and a new ledger that didn't need to prove anything to a judge. I printed the confirmations and slipped them into a slim folder labeled Home, Ongoing. Not pension, receipts, not evidence, just ongoing. The difference felt like sleep. Mrs. Klein knocked one Saturday with a foil-covered tray. "Lemon bars," she said. The powdered sugar dusted the porch like a gentler snow. We ate standing up, looking at the street we'd both watched for years. She said, "I'm glad it's quiet again." I nodded and meant it. Then I walked her affidavit, the one that helped the court hear the late-night truths, back to the file cabinet and slid it behind a plastic tab that read "Witnesses, thank you." I wrote a note on a card, "For your courage." I taped it to a grocery gift card and left it in her mailbox. Paper can close a case. Gratitude closes the door. Work came back into focus. I finished the cedar siding job that carried winter, planed two stubborn edges that had cupped in the rain. The shavings curled like cinnamon peels, and for the first time in months, the smell of fresh wood was only wood, not a metaphor, not a defense. I matched stain by eye instead of by formula. I let my hands remember what they knew before exhibits and stamps. Maya declined the bonus I tried to press into her palm. "Buy a better doorbell," she said, half smile softening the words. "Keep the originals of everything, the way you did. Not because you'll need them, but because it's good practice." She wrote her chain of custody summary on her letterhead, notarized it out of habit, and handed it to me like a goodbye. I filed it under closed. chain and realized the file cabinet finally felt like a cabinet again, not a vault. Spring arrived. Small at first, crocuses lifting in the median strips, wet sparrows arguing on the telephone line. I replaced the porch light bulb with a warmer tone, the one my mother liked, and polished the bell of glass until it caught dusk like a promise. On April 18th, I did something small that meant more than it should have. I put the banker's box pension receipts up on the high shelf. Not buried, not burned, just above eye level between cedar shims and a coil of extension cord. A record, not a relic. I wrote a single line in the new ledger. No longer the clean hands ledger, just house notes. April 18 evidence boxed. Life forward. Then I shut the cover. There's a kind of music to a house in spring. Windows you haven't opened since October slide in their tracks and give a small sigh at the stop. The back door answers quietly when the latch meets the strike. I rehung the bathroom door, shaved a hair off the hinge side, and it stopped ghosting itself closed. The fix took 5 minutes, but I'd been listening to slam and echo so long that the quiet felt like a discovery. Months later, early summer, heat pooling in the late afternoon, the Oregon State Bar posted a public reprimand. No fireworks, just a paragraph on a website dated June 21st stating the rule, the violation, and the discipline. I didn't refresh the page. I didn't forward it. I printed the notice, 3 inches of measured language, hole punched it, and filed it behind professional orders, third party. Then I closed the drawer. The reprimand didn't belong on a mantle. It belonged in a file in the past tense. I made a habit of small repairs I used to postpone. New felt under the dining chairs. Graphite in the deadbolt. A bead of clear silicone along the kitchen backsplash where water had flirted with the drywall. After months of legal verbs, these tiny verbs felt like a different grammar, one that didn't need a clerk. Sometimes, when dusk came in sideways and turned the living room grain to honey, I thought of Nora, not as a villain, not as a ghost, just as a person I loved and couldn't live with. I didn't say her name out loud in the house. Not superstition, respect. The court had given us clean lines. The rest was mine to keep clean. A young couple came by one afternoon, eyes bright, asking who had done the dormer. I did, I said, and we stood in the yard talking pitch and flashing like neighbors instead of adversaries. When they left, I watched them walk past the spot where a gray Audi had once idled, and I felt the soft relief that comes when history loses its appetite for your attention. I went through the phone one evening and deleted the courtroom folder from my home screen. Not erased, just not the first thing I saw when I reached for the weather. I moved house notes to the top and recipes next to it. I printed a lemon bar recipe, Mrs. Klein swore by, and slipped it into a sheet protector because apparently that's who I am. The man who puts his desserts under plastic and is passed under seal. On a Sunday in late June, I grilled chicken and left the back door open. The oven timer dinged from the kitchen, and for a heartbeat I felt my ribs climb the way they used to, proof reflex. Then I laughed, walked in, and turned off a timer I'd set for nothing. The pan inside was empty. It could stay that way. That night I wrote one last entry for spring. June 23, porch light steady. Bar notice filed, neighbors quiet. House breathing. I put down the pen and listened. The windows settled the way they do when the temperature drops a degree and the wood decides how to hold itself. Contracts are paper. Houses are wood. People live in the difference. I don't post my relief. I don't perform it. I measure it in sleep and in the way I don't check the lock 3 times anymore. The line between vigilance and peace is thinner than paint. Some nights I still run a fingertip along it and feel the old edge. Most nights I let it dry. There's a bench I built under the front window. A simple 2x with a tongue of walnut across the top. A small luxury that doesn't ask for attention. I sit there sometimes, coffee warm in my hands, and watch the clouds pass like slow boats. I try to remember everything that happened, and then I let myself forget. Not the lessons, never the lessons, just the noise. For anyone listening where I was last November, call a lawyer, make a ledger breathe, keep your hands clean. Paper is a raft. It doesn't have to be a home. Some endings arrive as receipts you never have to use. A year after the judgment, spring found its way back into Portland. The craftsman wore blossoms in its gutters like confetti. The porch rail shone with a fresh coat of varnish, and the house had learned how to breathe without strain. So had I. One Saturday, cleaning out the drawer where potholders had once hidden my lifeline of papers, I found something I'd forgotten, a slim envelope stamped in gold. The Nines gift certificate. Holiday promotion. Issued the same week the folio with the lipstick smear had sat sweating on my counter. Sweet credit. Bar tab allowance. A gift of betrayal disguised as hospitality. I held it between my fingers. It still smelled faintly of hotel ink and printer toner. The logo embossed at the top caught the kitchen light. For a moment I saw again the number $2,812.47. Two guests. Oysters at 11:43 p.m. I heard the oven timer ding in my head. Sefex oven timer ding, a ghost of evidence long boxed. I could have torn it in half. I could have burned it. Instead, I slipped it into an envelope addressed to the hotel staff. I wrote a short note on lined paper for your holiday party. May this be used for joy, not for hiding. I signed my name, Steady. 2 weeks later, the clerk at the Nines mailed me back a thank you card. We appreciate your generosity. It will cover our staff dinner this December. Just black ink on white cardstock. But it landed warmer than any verdict. Not all bills are mine anymore. Life had gone on quietly. The mortgage auto-drafted on the 1st. The porch light glowed steady at dusk. My ledger had shifted from clean hands to house notes, filled with lines about siding repairs and rose pruning, not subpoenas or affidavits. My revenge wasn't a fire, it was a lock, square and true, with the key where it belonged. Sometimes, when the rain threaded against the glass, I'd remember Nora, not with anger, not with longing, just memory. She hadn't lost me. She had given me away. And that's the line I carry now. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. It's not bitter, it's boundary. It's the difference between a pension in cedar and a shoebox of loss, between adjectives that wilt in court and nouns that stand under oath. I didn't just reveal an affair in front of a judge. I revealed myself to me.